Around 10 a.m. on January 15th, 1947. Betty Bersinger was taking her 3-year-old daughter in on a morning errand to a shoe repair store near what's now the Crenshaw neighborhood of Los Angeles. As they were passing an empty lot on Norton Avenue that had started to be taken over by nature, Bersinger recalls, quote,
"As I was walking along, I happened to glance over at my side, and I saw this strange sight. It looked like a mannequin that had been cut in half and was separated and was lying there. And I didn't glance at it too long because I had my little girl with me, and I thought, gosh, as I walked on further, I thought, that just didn't seem right to me. And I thought, I could see these kids with their bicycles, and I said, maybe it'll scare those kids if they ride to school and see this, so I better, call somebody to come and at least have a look and see what it is."
The body of 22-year-old Elizabeth Short was lying face up and naked, her body split in half at the waist. She was oddly posed with her eyes open, hands above her head with elbows bent, her legs out straight and spread apart. She had been hit over the head and pieces of her flesh had been cut out. At the corner of her mouth, there were 3-inch cut slits on each side. As gory as the scene was, there was no blood. It appeared the body had been drained and scrubbed before being placed where it was found. After identifying the body by its fingerprints with help from the FBI, the LAPD began circulating a flyer on hopes of getting more information. It described Short as, quote, 5 feet, 6 in, 118 pounds, black hair, very attractive, bad lower teeth with fingernails chewed to a quick. It was very common at this time for newspapers to give nicknames to murder cases. The papers called her the Block Dahlia, due to reports that she often wore slick black clothing and had striking dyed black hair. The autopsy on the body provided a chilling glimpse into Short's final moments. Officially, Short died of hemorrhage and shock. Marks on her wrist, neck, legs, and right thigh suggest that she had been bound and tortured, along with the slits around the corner of her mouth had been made while she was alive. She had also suffered a concussion from blows to her head. Reports say that the cuts were clean, raising suspicions early on that someone with surgical skills may have been responsible. 9 days after her body was found, envelopes showed up at offices of the Los Angeles Examiner. It contained some of Short's belongings, including her Social Security card, birth certificate, personal photos, and an address book that was missing a few pages. No fingerprints were found on the items. Which brings us to our main and only suspect, Dr. George Hodel. Many who worked on the case over the years believed they interacted with the real killer over some point, but no one feels stronger about this than Steve Hodel. After recurring as an LAPD homicide detective, having worked on over 300 murder cases, Steve Hodel posted his research that the murder was George Hodel, the detective's own father. George Hodel was a very wealthy doctor in Los Angeles, described as a well-connected, dashing man with a very high IQ. While George was not a practicing surgeon, he was reported to have breezed through medical school where he studied to be one. After George's death, his son Steve had found 2 photos of a woman he believed to be Elizabeth Short. He began to investigate where he was led to believe that his father had a romantic relationship. George Hodel would have had the medical training needed to produce the surgical mutilation performed on Short's body. Letters that were sent after Short's death to the police were said to match George Hodel's hand, writing according to a forensic expert. George Hodel also drove a black 1936 Packard that looked similar to the descriptions of the black car seen near where Short's body had been found. In 1959, George Hodel moved to the Philippines. Another case in 1967 where a woman was found dissected and posed in an empty lot, just like the Black Dahlia. Steve claims that at the time George was only living a 1/2 mile away from the crime scene. In 2012, Steve Hodel visited his childhood home with a production crew, another former police officer, and a search dog who picked up the scent of human decomposition in multiple locations on the property. After hearing about the theory, Steve Lopez, who was a LA Times reporter, went to the Los Angeles DA and was given access to files and grand jury documents. In the files he found a photo of George Hodel, listing him first among other suspects they ruled out. According to Steve Lopez, there was pretty convincing evidence against George that somehow got him to be ruled out and eliminated as a suspect, but according to his son, Steve Hodel, George knew about corruption in the LAPD because of his connections, and that the police covered George's guilt so they didn't get their own dirty laundry aired out. LAPD admits that much of the physical evidence from the Black Dahlia case is not with the files. It is unclear where it is or why it would be missing. While there are some doubts about the photos found in George's things is actually the Black Dahlia or the letters that were said to match his handwriting, there is enough suspicion that still leaves George a main suspect. Stephen K., the head of the LA County Deputy, said he, quote, "I would have no reservation about filing the counts of murder against Dr. George Hodel." George Hodel returned to the United States around 1990 and then passed away in 1991 at the age of 91. Even now it remains a question who killed the Black Dahlia. Will we ever know for sure? That remains unclear. As for now, the case remains unsolved.